Yeah.
We are live.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our next installment of the Charter Review Committee. Kelly, Ms. Kresser had circulated in advance an agenda for tonight's meeting, which is May 13th, 2020. And our first item tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would ask everyone to join in the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'll start it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. And Ms. Kresser, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Berkowitz.
Remember to take yourself off mute.
So he is here. I know you guys will have to unmute yourself when you talk, though. So Mr. Berkowitz is present. Ms. Castillo?
Present.
Mrs. Corso? Not yet. Mrs. Guerra?
Present.
Mr. Jones? Mr. Crafter?
Here.
Mr. LaMarca?
Here.
Mr. Mack is excused. Mr. Meredith? He's muted, but he's here. Mr. Melky?
Here.
Ms. Murray?
Here.
Ms. Sortino? And Mr. Whalen? And Ms. Yandel?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and just as a reminder to everybody, if you want to speak up, remember to take yourself off mute so that we can hear what you have to say. So the next item on the agenda then is the approval of the minutes from the May 4th, 2020 meeting. Those were circulated in advance of the meeting tonight. And I would first ask if there's any comments or corrections related to the minutes as have been circulated. Okay, hearing none, then I would entertain a motion to adopt the minutes and approve the minutes as submitted. I'll need a motion in a second. Not all at once.
I would do it, but I wasn't there for this.
I'll make the motion. This is Kurt.
Okay, thanks, Kurt. Do I have a second? Okay, have motion in a second. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, those are passed. Thank you. Next item up is the audience participation. And as a reminder tonight, what we're covering are charter sections 44 through 66, which covers the elections process, the appropriation process, granting of franchisees and initiatives and referendums. And so I will open it up now for any audience participation. And as a reminder, we are going to receive these comments from the audience, and it is not, it's not conversational. It's rather to receive their information and their input for our later consideration. So I don't know if there's anyone that's logged in that wants to make a comment, but we'll pause for a moment to see. Okay, hearing none, we will now move on to the next part of the agenda, which is the actual review of the charter. And tonight we are going, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with section 44, of the charter under the elections, and we're going to work our way through 66 of the charter. And just before we jump into that, just a little framing. So we've done basically 22 sections of the charter each meeting. After tonight, we'll have 22 more to go, which we will tackle on the June 1st meeting. And then Ms. Kresser has made arrangements for the political science professor from Kent State is tentatively scheduled to come to our meeting on June 17th to go through different forms of city government, including the ward system. And we have also made arrangements for the city staff to come in and provide us additional information on the July 6th and the July 17th, July 6th meeting, so that we can make sure that the additional input we've asked from that group has been on the record. And then what we would hope to do is that would then give us all the information and get us through all of the provisions of the charter. And then we will set up, and we'll get to this at the end of the meeting. We need to add a date. We missed one of our earlier meetings due to the COVID crisis. And so we'll need to add one on the end in mid-July or mid or the end July. So that's just kind of an overview of the process that we'll follow to get us down to the end where we're actually ready to vote on what we might want to submit to the city commission. So I'll pause there for a moment and see if that's engendered any questions or comments from the committee. Okay, hearing none. The first section up for review tonight is section 44, the time of holding elections, which deals with our regular municipal elections and indicates they'll be held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November in the odd numbered years. And goes on any matters by which the terms of the charter may be submitted to the electors at any special election may be submitted at a regular municipal election. And so I would ask, as we have been, if anyone on the committee has received any input from the community, or they would like to provide any input from their own perspective, or if you are in need of additional information in order to better evaluate this provision. And so I will stop there and open up the floor for anyone that would like to comment on section 44, time of holding elections. Okay, hearing none and following the format that we set up at the last meeting, I would indicate that given the lack of further discussion on this, I would put the section 44 time of holding elections in the category of no changes recommended. And again, just as a process reminder, we will ultimately go back and go over and make sure that we affirm that all the ones that we put in that category, that everyone's in agreement that they should stay in that category, and we will handle that as part of a in-person meeting that will occur in a month or so. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that and that the public's aware that we will go back. Right now, we're kind of going through and sorting these into the categories of more information or changes recommended or no changes recommended to help us identify our task in a little more detail. So then moving on to section 45 ballots, effectively section 45 says the ballots used in all elections provided for in this charter will be without party marks or designations. And again, I would ask, is there anyone that would like to comment on section 45 ballots, either from input from the community or from their own personal perspective, or a request for additional information? And I will pause now to allow comment. Okay, hearing none, I would then recommend that we put section 45 ballots in the category of no changes recommended. Next, we'll move on to section 46 for petition for place on the ballot. This provision deals with how a person can circulate for signatures to get a petition or to get something put on the ballot, and it requires a signed petition of not less than 1% of the total vote cast at the last election, but not less than the signatures of 100 qualified electors. That deals with the numbers. There's other provisions in there that I will not read at this point. But really, this deals with getting things placed on the mechanism for placement of items on the ballot for a vote. Again, I will ask if anyone has any input from either the community or from their own perspective, or a request for additional information related to Section 46, petition for place on ballot. And I will pause now for any comments. Okay, hearing none, I would recommend that Section 46, petition for place on the ballot, be placed in the category of no changes recommended. The next section is Section 47, declaration of candidacy. And again, this deals with the nominating position for election of office as city commissioner and the requirements related thereto. And again, I will ask if there's any input from the community or from you personally, or request for additional information on this Section 47 declaration of candidacy. Hearing none, I would suggest that recommend that Section 47 declaration of the candidacy be put in the category of no changes recommended. Next, Section 48, election. This has to deal with the process for the election of city commissioners and how that will work with the highest number of votes at the regular election being declared to be elected, and the mechanism for breaking ties, which are done pursuant to the direction of election authorities and the general election laws of the state. Again, I would ask if there's any community input that's been given to you, or any input that you would like to give personally, or request for any additional information on Section 48, election. Hearing none, I would recommend that we put Section 48, election, in the category of no changes recommended. Next is Section 49, general laws to apply. This effectively is indicative of what, the general election laws of Ohio, except as provided in the charter, will govern elections for the city. And I would ask if there's any input that you've received from the community, or that you would like to offer personally, or request for any additional information on Section 49, general laws to apply. Hearing none, I would recommend that Section 49, general laws to apply, be put into the record as no changes recommended. So that takes us through, that was the election process and procedures in the charter. And now we'll move on to appropriations. And the first section under the appropriations section of the charter is Section 50. The estimate, which effectively covers the budgetary process and the timing for the submission by the city manager to the city commission of the estimated expenditures and revenues of the city departments for the ensuing year. It also contains columns and for what needs to be presented and how it needs to be presented to the city commission. And so I would ask if there's any input that you've received from the community, or that you would like to offer, or a request for any additional information on Section 50, the estimate or the budget process for the city. Okay, hearing none, I would say that Section 50, the estimate, be put in the category of no changes recommended. Section 51 is the Appropriations Ordinance, and it deals with the process of how funds are appropriated by the City Commission, and the public process that's required related thereto, and the timing of that public process as well. And I would ask if there's anyone on the committee that has received any input from the community that they would like to share, any personal comments that they would like to make, or any additional information that they would request in order to evaluate Section 51 Appropriation Ordinance. Okay, hearing nothing, we will put that in. I recommend that we put that in the category of no changes recommended. Next is Section 52, revisions of the appropriations. And again, this is deals with the appropriations and expenditures of the city government and the ability to revise, repeal, or change said appropriations and to make additional appropriations by with the power of the city commission. And I will ask, is there any input that you've received from the committee you would like to make personally, or that you would request additional information to enable you to weigh in on this provision? Hearing none, I would suggest that Section 52, revision of appropriations, be put in the category of no changes recommended. Next, Section 53, transfer of funds, which addresses the ability of the city the city commission, upon the request of the city manager, to transfer balances and appropriations within the appropriation ordinance as deemed necessary or appropriate. And I would ask, has anyone received any input from the community, or they would like to offer any personally or any additional information or request for additional information? Hearing none, I would suggest Section 53, transfer of funds, be put in the category of no changes recommended. And then the last provision under the appropriations section of the charter is Section 54, unencumbered balances, which deals with the process of how to appropriate unused funds and what the uses that can be made and adjustments that can be made with unencumbered balances. And I would ask if anyone has received any input from the community or personally that they would like to make on this provision, or any additional information that you would request. Okay, hearing none, I would suggest Section 54, unencumbered balances, be put in the category of no changes recommended. Okay, so then that closes out the appropriations section of the charter, and we now move on to franchises. And the first section under franchises is Section 55, grants limited, which then which covers the city commission's ability to grant, or it limits them to only being able to work within the confines as contained in the charter. With respect to the construction operation of public utility and streets and public grounds of the city. And I would ask if there are any comments you've received from the public or that you would like to make personally, or request for additional information on Section 55, grants limited. Hearing none, I suggest we put Section 55, grants limited, into the no changes recommended. Next is Section 56, period of grants, which covers the length of time and the renewal periods in the process for renewal and the vote required for purposes of grants and franchises by the City Commission. And again, I would ask if anyone's received any comments from the community, or they want to make comments from their own personal perspective, or request for additional information on Section 56, period of grants. Hearing none, I would suggest Section 56, period of grants, be put in the category of no changes recommended. That takes us to Section 57, assignment, which prevents assignment of a franchise without the express consent of the City Commission. Again, are there any comments from you personally, or that you've received from the community, a request for additional information on Section 57, assignment? Okay, hearing none, I would recommend that we put that in the category of no changes recommended. Section 58 is the right of purchase. And this has to deal with as it says, the right of purchase or lease of the property utility used and useful for the operation of a utility, the price and the process related therein. And I would ask if anyone on the committee has received any input related to that section, or that they would like to offer from their personal perspective, or request for additional information with respect to Section 58, right of purchase. Hearing none, I would suggest that Section 58, right of purchase, be put in the category of no changes recommended. Section 59, extension by annexation. And again, this is in relate to the franchise and the impact of annexation related thereto. And I would ask if there's any comments on this section or any requests for additional information. Hearing none, I would recommend that we put section 59, extension by annexation, in the category of no changes recommended. Section 60, then, right of regulation. And again, this is dealing with the franchisees and the rights of the city, whether in terms reserved or not, to control at all times distribution of space over and under and across all streets, alleys, public grounds, etc., for public utilities. And so I would again ask if anyone has received any input related to this section or wants to offer any input related to this section or request any additional information. Hearing none, I would recommend that we put section 60, right of regulation, into the category of no changes recommended. Section 61, forfeitures, again, under the category of franchises. And is it up? Can we put that up on the screen? And this deals with the potential for forfeiture of the rights granted by the city commission. And I would ask if there's any comments from the committee, any community input you've received, or any requests for additional information with respect to section 61, forfeitures. Okay, hearing none, I would recommend that we put section 61, forfeitures, in the category of no changes recommended. And then that takes us to section 62, accounts and reports, which were repealed on November 7th, 1989, and section 63, grants not included, which were repealed on November 7th, 1989 as well. So there's no action that's necessary with respect to section 62 or section 63. And then section 64, general provisions. Nothing in the charter is intended to, except as specifically stated, to limit the city commission the exercise of its lawful powers respecting public utilities, or from the city from imposing in any such grant further restrictions or provisions it may deem to be in the public interest, provided the same are not inconsistent with the provisions of the charter or the constitution of the state. Again, I would ask, are there any questions or comments or requests for additional information with regard to section 64, general provisions? Hearing none, I would suggest that we put section 64, general provisions, in the category of no changes recommended. So with that takes us through franchises. That section of the charter has been covered. And then that takes us to initiative and referendum. And under that section is section 65, state law to apply, which basically indicates that the provision for initiative and referendum in municipal corporations now enforced or hereinafter enacted as prescribed by the general laws of the state shall govern that process. And so I would again ask, have you received any comments, requests for changes, or you would make comments or requests for change or requests for additional information regarding section 65, state laws to apply to initiative and referendum process? Hearing none, I would recommend that we put that in the category of no changes recommended. The next section of the charter has to do with the recall process. And originally tonight, we were going to get through section 66. But as I look at it, section 66 is the first section of I think, five sections, six or seven sections that deal with recall. And I think we should probably keep those all together for purposes of continuity. And also, I'm mindful of the fact that we did advertise that tonight we would go through 44 through 66. And so I want to stick, even though we've gone through those rather quickly. That was what we had publicly announced that we would be reviewing tonight. And so I think my recommendation is that we not move forward in spite of the fact that we have additional time here, such that we want to make sure that we've given the public a full opportunity to weigh in on the topics that we said that we would be discussing. And so with that in mind, I think that would conclude the review of the charter provisions for this evening, unless there's comments or objections to proceeding in that fashion. Okay. Hearing none, we will proceed in that fashion, and I'll move on to the next item of business on the agenda, which is old business. There are no items listed under old business, and so I will ask the committee, are there any items of old business that anyone on the committee would like to bring up at this time? Okay, I will close old business. Number 7 on the agenda is new business. Again, there are no items listed under new business tonight, and so I would ask, is there any new business that anyone on the committee would like to bring before the committee tonight? Okay, hearing none, that takes us to number 8 on the agenda, which is the identify the next meeting date, which is June 1st, 2020 at 5 p.m. And again, to go back and refresh on that date, our homework is, as Mr. Kresser always asks me, what's our homework? Our homework is to review 66 through 87, take us to the end of the city, the city charter. And that will conclude our initial review of the charter to our sort of items that require more information, more discussion, or more information from external experts to help us with our decision-making and recommendations to the City Commission. And so we'll wrap that up at the meeting on June 1st of 2020. And then as I indicated, we have tentatively set up June 17th for the political science expert to come in and walk us through the provisions of the different forms of city government and answer your questions related to ward systems and the pros and the cons related thereto versus the current system that we have in place. And so we'll take care of that then. And then again, we have the following meeting then is, I think, June 17th, which we would invite city staff in to weigh in on those items that we have set aside already, or that we may set aside in our next tranche that we're reviewing. And they will provide us information at that meeting. And then on July 6th, we'll come back together, and any issues that have yet to be addressed, we'll provide the additional information on that. And we'll begin the process of narrowing and committing our recommendation to the City Commission in writing. And then, as I mentioned, we'll want to schedule one more meeting, and we've got 2 dates to potentially propose, either July 15th or July 29th. Both are Wednesdays, and we pick one or the other, and we would convene at 5 o'clock. And it would be at that meeting that I would hope that we would be prepared to take a vote on what our recommendation to the City Commission would be. And so I'm going to pause for a second there and see if that's engendered any questions or comments from the committee.
Mr. Chairman, this is Kelly, if I may.
Yes.
Dr. Nichols from Kent State was actually available on the June 17th date.
Okay.
So if we can flip, I think you might have said June 10th.
I'm sorry, June 17th. I have my notes backwards. Sorry about that. So okay. Yeah, I'll clarify that again. On June 17th, the political science professor from Kent State will be is tentatively scheduled to be in attendance. to discuss the forms of government. So that's June 17th, 2020. Thank you, Kelly.
Lamarca here.
Yes, go ahead.
Was the city staff coming in? You combined those, I think, with the professor.
Yeah, I think we've straddled two meetings, depending. The professor will have will be first on June 17th. And then if we have additional time, we can have the city, weigh in on that. But we'll schedule that, what topics will be covered there versus on July 6th. And we'll make sure that there's plenty of advance notice, both for the committee and the public, to understand what the items of discussion will be at each of those meetings.
Very good.
You're unmuted.
Hello,
Yes?
this is Judy Corso.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, I wasn't online for the attendance, but I have been online the whole time, so I just want to tell you that I'm here.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. It's good to see you. I can see you. I can verify you're there. I see your smiling face right now. So, all right. Well, excellent. Okay. Is there any other comments or concerns or questions that we can address during tonight's session?
I have one question, if I might.
Sure.
I don't know that it applies to this or not, but I'm curious, under what section of the charter does TIF funds come into play?
Boy, I don't know that. I mean, I certainly can't answer that on the spot. Trevor, I think Trevor Hayberger's on. Could you weigh in on that at a high level, or?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, the TIF stuff comes from the Ohio Revised Code. So there's nothing in our charter regarding TIFs. So those are all just creatures of the Ohio Revised Code. That, along with many other of the economic development stuff. The stuff we talked about today with the franchises, those were big probably back when Duff was law director. The state and feds have come in and pretty much taken home rule out of all of that stuff. So the franchises that we dealt with today, while it's important to still leave them in there just in case we ever get that home rule authority back, I think we did good by just leaving it in there. But stuff like TIFs and those similar economic development stuff are just creatures of the Ohio Revised Code.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question regarding the next meeting and recalls. Is there anything in the charter that addresses firing or recalls of administrative positions?
I think that's dealt with at the city commission level, but I'll let Trevor weigh in.
Yes. So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Corso, technically the city commission only has 2 employees, Eric Woopser and Kelly Cresser, the clerk, and the city manager. So those are the hires and fires for the city commission. So to answer your question, like if someone wanted to get rid of someone other than those 2, they would have to go through, the city manager, talking with them, and ultimately it would be the city manager's decision.
Okay, I just was curious. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn this May 13th to 2020 meeting of the Charter Review Committee.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second that, Jade.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
The opposed, same sign. Okay, we're adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine. Thank you.